Hello, this is April Dimitri. I'm going to be talking about the Assure model and how we incorporated that into our copyright lesson. My group members are Mary Herrera, Rachel McDevitt, and Maggie Griffith. So, how did we use Assure in the copyright lesson, and how do we use that to guide us? We addressed the 6 domains, so A for analyzing our learners, S for standards and learning objectives, S for strategies and resources, U for utilizing those resources effectively, R requiring active learner participation, and then E for evaluating and revising the lesson according to if those learning objectives were met. Now, to get started, the first step, A, analyze learners. Our students are in a 7th grade English class with backgrounds primarily in a urban and low socioeconomic area. Our priority as the teacher is to get the students highly engaged with the lesson and actively participating. So to do that, before we started the presentation of the lesson, we did a pre-assessment of getting to know what the students, what their prior knowledge was on the subject and what they felt about it, what their attitudes were. So we present students on an interactive whiteboard 5 real-world questions about copyright applications, scenarios, and the students have to answer with clickers true or false to these different scenarios. So this kind of gets them warmed up, thinking about the topic, and it also informs the teacher what they know and what discrepancies there are from what they think they know and how much they do know. So after that, students will break into small groups and then have a little discussion about what they just answered, with also guiding questions about how they feel about copyright law and fair use. Okay, so after this pre-assessment, before we get into the lesson, there is one side note to make mention of, is that this copyright lesson addresses also different learning abilities and modalities. So we're addressing all students with different backgrounds by using a diverse set of media materials and doing that through differentiated instruction, doing that with different kinds of strategies. And at certain times during the lesson, the students can kind of go at their individual pace, and with these different kinds of strategies, you can tap into what their strengths are, all the while trying to get them to meet the comprehension of the lesson. So that is a snapshot of our learners. After that, the second step is the standards. We make sure as we've designed the lesson and as we implement the lesson that we're following the standards and learning objectives. So I reference TEKS here. So we're definitely addressing the English Language Arts standards for grade 7. Then there is the ISTE standards, also known as NETS for students. There's 3 domains that are addressed throughout the lesson, which is 1, empowered learner, 2, digital citizen, 3, knowledge constructor. And then additionally, we address standards for the 21st century learner. And essentially, we're also trying to prepare our students to have the skills they need in order to continue through their educational career and beyond that. So, focusing on the ISTE standards, which I went over the 3 domains. Here we kind of elaborate a little bit more, but the first domain is that they're demonstrating competency in their learning goals through the technology. They're also practicing the responsibilities of what it is to be a digital citizen. And then they're also creating. So students critically curate a variety of resources using digital tools. So they're taking information and they're also constructing it. So that is the ISTE standards. I've already mentioned the TEKS standards. This is the English Language Arts and Reading. So students will analyze images, graphics, and sounds together in various forms to impact meaning. So they interpret both explicit and implicit messages through different kinds of media. And then they're also writing and going through the writing process, using elements of the writing process to write their reflective writings and their blogs. Okay, and then overall, the lesson is guided by student learning objectives. So we'll always use this to guide us. So 1, presented with copyright information and real-world applications, students will demonstrate an understanding and reflective thinking of copyright law, fair use, and public domain. 2, the 7th grade learners will write a reflection that will later be incorporated into an ePortfolio blog that responds to the following questions. So they have guided questions in order to get them thinking, what are some things you learned about copyright, and do you think it's fair to have copyright law? So it kind of gets them thinking of how it relates to their life and what they personally feel about it. And then 3 is as copyright advocates in a small group setting. So this is the third part. They're going to meet as a group and they're going to create an infographic using Piktochart software with 5 takeaway points on copyright law, fair use, and public domain. So what they've learned, but then they'll also refer to the copyright handout, the Google handout, with links to more information about each topic, so that way they can go into it a little bit further and do the research themselves, and then apply that, bring it together, apply it, and then visually demonstrate it through their graphic. So these are the 3 output deliverables that the students perform. Okay, so the third part of the Assure model, strategy and resources. How do we use it in our instruction to get specific learning outcomes? Okay, so to meet those outcomes, there are various strategies that we implement. The teacher-centered instruction with supplemental materials for students to use. This is in the Prezi PowerPoint that we present to them, that they get all the information, and then with the Google handout, they get supplemental information. And then by doing this, they're also seeing how a presentation can be used through Prezi as well. And then the strategy is, of course, very student-centered learning with opportunities for whole class and small group discussion, as well as individual writing expression. So there's definitely a variety of settings. Specific resources that we will use throughout the lesson is the Prezi presentation that the students will see demonstrated. As well, the teacher will supply the students with an online physical Google handout, so they'll practice researching, guided research through the links that were provided. And then the students will have some practice with their ePortfolio software that they will write their personal blogs in. So they will first write it out on paper, kind of get their ideas flowing, and then after that they'll incorporate it into their blog. The blog's will be managed by the teacher, and it will be set to be private. This is a classroom blog, so no one outside the class will be able to see it unless the setting is set to otherwise. And then the group project, the students will get familiar with Piktochart software to do a collaborative infographic. Okay, so moving along. U for utilizing resources. Okay, so how do we ensure that these resources and strategies are effectively implemented? We refer to the 5 Ps guideline. So that way we make sure that all the technology and materials are used appropriately. So the 5 Ps, preview resources. Before we get into even presenting the lesson, we will review all the videos and the links and what we use in the copyright lesson to ensure that they're age appropriate and that they're relevant to what the students would know, and what they could possibly apply to their everyday life. Prepare resources. We want to make sure that students can transition from these different kinds of collaborative group environments to individual writing, and then individual writing back to group. So we'll prepare that everything is smooth with transition. We'll prepare the environment, so that's going back to that as well. And we will also, in preparing the environment, we'll make sure the programs will be up and running and ready to go for the learners to actually quickly get into the project. And then we will prepare the learners as well. So part of the lesson is not just the content, but teaching students how to use all these different technology tools. So we'll demonstrate how to use the links in the Google handout and how to conduct the research, and then different ways that they can create the infographics. So we get them familiar with, with supplemental tutorials with how to create an infographic. And then we'll provide the learning experience. So we will implement all these things, the delivery of information and the tutorials, as we go through the lesson according to what the students need at the time. So if they don't really need further assistance, then we won't spend too much time with the tutorials if they don't need the assistance in getting familiar with the tools. If they need more information on clarifying what the content's about, then we may focus on that a little bit more and help them, guide them through their research to get more information about copyright. Okay. So, R in our Assure model is a very important, crucial component, which is requiring learner participation, or what I like to say, require active learner participation, where student demonstration of comprehension and application through an active engagement is facilitated throughout the lesson. So there are different ways that they can be actively participating, and then listed out here are just the different ways that they're participating through these different activities and using different media. So as I've gone over before, they'll be exposed to the Prezi presentation, the demonstration of it, and then videos through that, embedded through that. And then they will also go through the process of reflective writing and then the practice of putting that into an online blog. And then utilizing the Google handout, copyright handout, and going through that process of taking information that they research and then analyzing and synthesizing that and putting it into the infographic design production. So before they get into that, they have to have a group discussion and collaborate as well. So they are actually discussing their ideas verbally as well. So that is all the different ways that they are actively participating within this lesson. And then finally, as we get to the end, it is very important to evaluate and revise according to how the lesson, how it went. The students will complete the student completion rubric and the copyright lesson survey. And these are used to evaluate the effectiveness of the copyright lesson on student learning outcomes and reflections. Now, the student completion rubric, let's go into that a little bit more specifically. This is something the students will be very aware of. This will help guide them as they complete their tasks, so that way they know what the objectives are. But essentially, it's the teacher that is looking at their work and giving the final say, the final score on the rubric according to what they completed and the quality of how they completed it. So that's separate, student completion rubric. And then what makes also the Assure model a little different as well is that there's this added on survey that assesses the effectiveness of technology integration in the lesson. So how does the teacher know that the different kinds of strategies and technology and media and materials that were used, how do they know that this was effective? So students will have the chance to give their feedback on a very easy online survey that addresses whether they felt certain strategies, materials, and technology and activities were effective. If they felt that were interesting, or if they felt that it was easy or challenging, or if they enjoyed it or if they didn't. So this information will be analyzed by the teacher along with the student rubrics to determine the extent of the revisions that are needed, that will be needed to be applied to the copyright lesson. So that, having this evaluation and this feedback from the students brings us all the way back to student learning outcomes again. So we kind of did a full circle thing while incorporating the Assure model, where we're making sure that what we set out to do, we specifically put out there, the student learning outcomes, that is being met. And we are assessing